I'd like you to join me on an adventure to a small town of around 11,000 people called Rost River in Pennsylvania. The political landscape there was just rocked to its core when two of the township commissioners who campaigned as Democrats and won switched to join the Republican Party in the middle of their terms. One of these individuals was just elected in November. The picture being painted, and by their own quotes, is that the Democratic Party no longer represents their values, that it's become much too socialist in their eyes. Now, you may be saying, Tim, why should I care about this small town of 11,000 people? Well, first of all, every small town and every individual in this country matters, as does their vote. But we're seeing a phenomenon across the country, from New Mexico to Mississippi and in Pennsylvania. Democratic elected officials are switching and joining the Republican Party. Now, of course, there's the most famous Jeff Van Drew, who was a national level congressman who joined the Republican Party. But in Pennsylvania, in a town like Rost River, we can see an example of why it's happening. And it's also very important because it is happening in Pennsylvania. This is a state that was reliably blue up until about 2016, when Donald Trump won, and by a very narrow margin. We're now seeing local level politicians join the Republican Party. And keep in mind, Jeff Van Drew's district, New Jersey's second, is just across the river from Pennsylvania, from Philadelphia, actually. This is excellent news for Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And I have to wonder why it is that walk away, the idea of leaving the Democratic Party, why this phenomenon of quitting is almost exclusively from left to right and not the other way around. As I've explained it before, politics seems to flow in one direction. The far left wants you out. No matter what you do, you can't win. The way I put it is this. If I took a picture standing next to some left-wing individual, they would accuse that individual of being right-wing, not me of being left-wing. If the only option then is to move right, don't be surprised when they do. This is happening across the country, and I think part of it has to do with Bernie Sanders' victories. At a national level, he is doing very well among progressive activists, but it's ostracizing local level politicians who are more moderate. This is going to pave the way for a Trump landslide. And I'm going to say something I never thought I'd say. While Trump isn't going to unify literally every person in this country, it's kind of strange to see Democrats joining the Republican Party because it's more unity than we've seen in a long time, in spite of all of the divisiveness we've seen with political polarization. We may end up seeing a supermajority in the Republican Party. Now, that's a bold prediction. I'm not sure what the probability is. But with local level politicians switching sides, it may be coming true. Let's get started and read about the small town of Rost River. But I want to show you some other examples. Mississippi, for instance, a story about a state senator who quit the Democratic Party. And I want to talk about voter turnout and why things are starting to look better and better for Republicans and Donald Trump. And I know a lot of people on the left are going to be angry and they don't want to hear it, but I don't know what else to tell you. The first story is from Trib Live. But before we read it, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There are several ways you can give, but the best thing you can do is share this video. It really does help my channel. But I want to make a point about this. The news you're seeing, it's real. People are quitting the Democratic Party. There are a lot of people on the left who might not know this is happening, not realizing that their party is falling apart in the face of the rise of the woke left, the progressive left, the socialist left. They're being torn straight down the middle. Many people who don't watch other news sources, they only get, say, MSNBC, won't know it's happening. So hopefully sharing this will break that echo chamber and let them know at a local level it is right in front of your face. I will also add that many of you aren't subscribed. So if you really do like this content, want to see more of it, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, because YouTube isn't actually recommending my content that much anymore. They're doing a lot to try and strike down channels like mine, though slowly. Let's get started and read from Trib Live. Party swaps change face of Rost River politics. The balance of political power in Rost River shifted recently when two of the township's commissioners changed their political affiliations from Democrat to Republican. In January, board chairman John Lorenzo, who was elected in November as a Democrat, and Henry Boldizar Jr., whose current 4-year term started last year, switched parties and in doing so gave Republicans a 3-2 board majority. Boldizar previously served about a year as the elected chairman of Westmoreland County's Democratic Committee before he resigned the post in 2015. Quote, "They are folks we've been courting. And they expressed the Democratic Party as it stands today no longer represents their core values, said Bob McPherson, chairman of the County Republican District 4 Committee, which includes Rostravar. McPherson said he lobbied both to make the switch, but neither required major arm twisting to move to the GOP. Both Lorenzo and Baldessar officially switched their party registrations on January 27th, according to the Elections Bureau. Lorenzo, in an interview earlier this week, said his party switch was not based on any issues he had with the county's Democratic committee, but was a move he said is reflective of his evolving political stance. He says, I grew up in a household that was heavily Democratic and never got to choose my party for myself. My ideology was that I am fiscal conservative, pro-life, pro-gun, and the Democratic Party has moved so far to the socialist spectrum. Baldessar did not return a request for comment. They say Rostravar's Board of Commissioners was sworn in on January 6. At that time, Democrats held a 4-1 board majority. Commissioner Devin M. DiRienzo was the only Republican. Rostravar voters elected the person, not the party. I don't think it changes the dynamic of the township. Meanwhile, Democrats still outnumber Republicans by about 500 registered voters in Rostravar. According to the Elections Bureau, as of the end of February, there are 3,663 Democrats and 3,146 Republicans registered to vote in the township. The reason why I think this is significant is that a lot of these moves are based on what these politicians think their voters want. And if they're making a move before the voters actually do, you have to recognize politicians want to get reelected. I mean, not everybody. Sometimes it is a matter of principle, and particularly at a local level, I'd imagine they are being driven, for the most part, by principle. But I think we might end up seeing voter registrations flip, or registered Democrats actually vote for the Republican in the general election in November. Now, what we're seeing here isn't the first time it's happened in November. From PennLive.com, Pennsylvania Democrats lose a state senator. John Udachak of Luzerne County declares himself independent, will caucus with GOP. Now, here's a man who has not joined the Republican Party, but he's caucusing with them. You got to understand, for people like me, I was basically Democrat my whole life. I understand exactly why they're doing it and what they're doing. Donald Trump is not far right. He is a New York liberal, but he's adopted a lot of conservative principles. He's pulled in an insurgent base that's taken over the Republican Party. And the Democrats are seeing something similar happen, but with socialists. Regular people in this country have more in common with Donald Trump in spite of everything they hate about him than they do with socialists. Bernie Sanders can attract the fringe activists who are finally waking up and being excited, or for the most part, he's really attracting existing Democrat base. But he can't get the core of what America is, the majority of the Democratic Party. The fracturing will be their end. Now, this man, John Udachak, will caucus with the GOP, but here's the most important point. From the Philadelphia Inquirer, a new poll of 2020 swing states shows just how important Pennsylvania will be. Pennsylvania is supposed to be blue. I mean, you've got Philadelphia. It's blue. But there was a recent story from the Wall Street Journal that went and talked to a bunch of people who lived in Philly. And in North Philly, there were former Democrats, people who voted for Hillary, saying they've decided to vote for Trump this time around. And it's probably best explained by Trump himself. In one of the things he said at the conservative, I believe it's CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. I don't know what CPAC stands for, but it's a bunch of conservatives gathering. And Donald Trump said something to the effect of, I may be a mean guy, but I'm working for you. And people will begrudgingly choose that over the far left candidate. The story from the Inquirer points out that it is a really blue place, a kind of union place, a working class place. But many people have found that the economy is doing really, really well. I live in this area. In fact, I live very close to the district of Jeff Van Drew, who switched from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. I talk to my neighbors. I'm literally 10 minutes from Philly. I'm in the Philly burbs. And what I hear from so many blue collar people is that, first of all, the economy is great and they're not super concerned about what's going on else, in politics. And they'll probably just vote for Trump to keep the train going. But some people have actually said to me, they're sick and tired of the scandals. They just don't want to hear about Orange Man bad anymore. And I mean it. And other people have said, what is going on with the far left push? Giving many people no option. Some of these people hate the Republicans and just don't want to vote now. And if they sit out and Democrat turnout is low, well, then Donald Trump is going to win. Here's something interesting. We've seen pretty good voter turnout for Democrats, sort of. A lot of people have bragged the voter turnout is higher than it was in '08. But accounting for population growth, the New York Times says it's not actually that great because you should have gained a lot more. Here's the thing, though. These are people who are voting in the Democratic primary. What's the chance that many of these people do not see Bernie or Biden or Buttigieg or whoever they want win, so they sit out the general election? Each of these candidates in the Democratic Party has a small contingent of, Bernie or bust kind of voters that if it's not my candidate, I won't vote at all. Yang had the biggest. Around 42% of his voters polled said they would not support the Democratic candidate if it was not Andrew Yang. So what do? Well, some might vote Trump and some might not vote at all. So the voter turnout we're seeing may actually go down when it comes to the general because the preferred candidate didn't win. You get to vote for Andrew Yang in the primary, you feel good about it. But then when it comes to general and it's Biden, you just say, not interested. What we're seeing here is it's actually a commonly occurring theme. 8 elected officials switch party affiliation to Republican in Mississippi. This from just a couple days ago. Now, 6 of them were Democrats. I just want to know why. Why do you think they're leaving the Democrats and joining the Republicans? Because we're not seeing it the other way around other than I think Justin Amash. There's probably some stories for sure. But typically, all of the bigger high-profile stories are the Democrats going in the other direction. This story I believe this is from New Mexico, Santa Fe. Check this out. Harry Montoya to run for CD3 as GOP. Perennial Democrat candidate says he's now a proud Republican. What is happening? When Brandon Strzok started the walk-away movement, I don't think he realized how many people were waiting for him. And he's faced criticism. They've called him, an astroturfer or whatever they want to call it, saying it's Russian bots. It's not. Politicians are doing it. This guy apparently is New Mexico's 3rd congressional district seat. He was a Democrat. He was a Democrat. He was a Democrat now running as a Republican. That to me is shocking. Check out this story from the New York Post. Why these black New Yorkers are voting for Trump in 2020. These people, to my understanding, are part of the walk-away movement. There's a guy named Brandon Strzok, I believe. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Brandon. And he started this movement, but I think the movement was there. It was waiting for him almost. He made a video that went viral talking about all of the problems of the Democratic Party and why it was basically disgusting him and why he wanted to leave. Now he's wearing a MAGA hat. And this guy is a gay hairdresser from New York City. I think I got that right. So he's certainly seen the problems on the left, and many others have joined him. When I first saw the viral video campaign, I was like, wow, that's interesting. I'm not surprised. Then it went really viral. Now the dude's got hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, and many people have now stood up with being inspired by him to stand up for what they believe in and walk away as well. I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it happened. And I kind of feel like when Brandon made that video, there were so many people waiting for someone to say it so they could just up and leave. Now, you guys know me, milquetoast fence sitter. I don't think I ever have to actually say that I would be leaving the left or whatever because I rag on Democrats on the left all day and night. My position is begrudgingly accepting of how awful the Democratic Party has become and that I am holding out and crossing my fingers that the party can be saved at some point. But for the time being, I have no problem saying these people have lost it. And I completely understand why so many people have walked away. Let's read a little bit of the story from the New York Post. 4 years ago, candidate Donald Trump's pitch to African Americans heading to voting booths was simple. What do you have to lose? While he captured just 8% of the black vote in 2016, recent polls suggest things could be different this time around. In November, an Emerson poll reported a 34.5% approval rating among black voters, and a January Gallup poll reported a 14% increase in satisfaction over race relations among Americans. Here, 5 black New Yorkers, all former Democrats, tell the Post why they're flipping parties and voting Republican this year. It is not just at the elected level. It is at the individual level these people are doing this. There are many people who are on the left who are secret Trump voters. The New York Times called this Trump's whisper network. It played a huge role in Donald Trump's victory in 2016 because there were many people who would publicly say they wouldn't vote for him, but privately they went and did. Others think that when the pollsters started calling, nobody wanted to admit they would vote for Trump out of a fear of cancel culture. And now we're seeing electoral results. Although there was some kind of blue wave in 2018 with large voter turnout, things might be reversing now. In this story from the Western Journal, we can see Republicans celebrate after special election flips Kentucky seat held by Democrats for 33 years. I have no idea what's going on in this country. But this district in Kentucky was held by Democrats for 33 years, and Republicans just took it back. I mean, that's really good news for Republicans, and it may show that these politicians who are switching parties are making the right choice in doing so because the voters don't want Democrats out of a fear of a rise in socialism and woke ideology. I want to be fair, however. Taking a look at New Jersey's 2nd District, which is very close to the Philadelphia, to the Metro, which is Pennsylvania, this is where Jeff Van Drew won. A Republican held this seat for about 28 years. And then Jeff Van Drew ran as a Democrat and defeated Seth Grossman in 2018. So it is true, it is fair to say that Democrats flipped some seats that were held by Republicans. The only problem is that Jeff Van Drew is now a Republican. So once again, the Republicans still hold this seat. The Democratic Party is not faring well. Although they had pretty good voter turnout in yesterday's South Carolina primary, they say it's setting near record turnout in South Carolina. But here's what needs to be said about their near record turnout. The New York Times, in referencing New Hampshire, says some Democrats have cited an exciting sounding statistic. Turnout broke the record set in 2008, and this is in New Hampshire, when 287,542 people voted in the Democratic primary. This is noteworthy, but it is mostly attributable to the fact that there are more eligible voters in New Hampshire now than in 2008. The percentage of eligible voters who participated did not change much. Also, because unaffiliated voters can participate in primaries in New Hampshire, it is tricky to compare cycles in which both parties have competitive races, meaning unaffiliated voters have to choose between two serious contests, with cycles in which one party has an incumbent whose renomination is a foregone conclusion. This did not mean that breaking the 2008 record was insignificant. A lot of people did come out to vote. But for all the people saying, yes, we did it, we broke that record, you got to consider population growth as well as domestic migration and people moving into the state. And then the New York Times says it's actually not that good. And I also got more bad news for the Democrats. Look, I know this whole thing is basically about people switching parties. The Democrats are still seeing people vote in their primary. But what happens when the people who voted in New Hampshire, who voted for Yang, now switch for Trump or don't vote? That voter turnout won't translate to a Democratic vote in the general election, like I stated earlier. But more importantly, 538 with this hot take, increased voter turnout could benefit Republicans or Democrats in 2020. Thanks, 538. You just don't know, do you? The point is, while many people want to say that high voter turnout is good for Democrats, Moody's Analytics, for instance, said with maximum voter turnout, Trump loses by a teeny tiny margin. 538 disagrees. I don't want to pretend like either is more correct than the other, though Moody's has been extremely accurate in all of their forecast models based off economics. I think the only time they were wrong was with Donald Trump. But now we can see 538 saying, maybe that's just not true. It could help Republicans. And one of the reasons is that swing state voters who tend not to vote are more likely to vote Republican. At least that was one poll we saw in the past week or so. The bad news across the board for Democrats is that the reason why we're seeing moderate voter turnout, the reason why people are switching parties is because the Democratic Party is just in complete chaos. It really is falling apart. From Nancy Pelosi's poor leadership, the failed impeachment, Trump's successes, a booming economy, a record peace deal, things for Trump are just too good. Meanwhile, an insurgent campaign from far left activists and socialists is trying to take the Democratic Party, meaning their concentration is split on two fronts. The latest predictive model from 538 shows that no one is going to win the nomination. So who is the best candidate to win? We have no idea. Bernie Sanders has a 27% chance, according to 538's prediction model. Joe Biden has a 14% chance. But there is a near 60% chance no one gets it, and this will be the first brokered convention since 1952. And then you know what happens? The delegates will vote for Biden or Buttigieg or Bloomberg, not Bernie. And then the far left will trounce about Milwaukee's downtown city center, trashing windows and going nuts, and blaming the poor working people of Milwaukee for a problem the Democrats create. And what do you think the people in these cities are going to do when they see the violence and destruction and the riots, like they've been seeing with Antifa? They're going to start saying, maybe Trump is right about these people. And they're going to witness it firsthand in good old blue Milwaukee. But it's hard to know exactly what will happen. Things can change. Maybe Bernie rallies up new voters. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. But there's one thing that is for certain. Going down to the smallest level, and I mean that with the utmost respect. I'm not trying to disregard this town. The small towns of America, particularly in Pennsylvania, these people are saying no. And in a town that once had a 4-1 Democratic majority, 2 people switched, giving Republicans the majority. I think we can expect something similar to happen. Now, not at the national level. It's going to get interesting. There are a lot of districts that are heavy blue, and that will not change. But when we see small towns, when we see commissioners and candidates switching to the Republican Party, when state senators quit, when national level congressmen like Jeff Van Drew switch, giving the Republicans back a seat they had held for 28 years, why should I assume Democrats can win? Michael Moore says Trump can win, and that guy says a bunch of crazy stuff. Most people on the left of sound mind, we see high-profile people saying Trump's going to win, and we all know it. The activists can spit and yell all they want. But while Bernie Sanders rises in the ranks, there is a growing fear that this will actually boost the Republican Party. And as you heard from this commissioner in Roast River, it's the rise of socialism. They don't want to be involved in that. Moderate Democrats worried about Sanders' surge in 2020 field. Yep. Because when it comes to the House, people are going to see Sanders at the top of the ticket, and they're going to say, no way, no thank you. From the polls in the primary yesterday in South Carolina, I believe it was around 56% of Democratic voters favored socialism, which means a lot of Democrats probably quit and they don't care anymore because the Gallup polls show nationwide most people actually would never vote for a socialist. And we've actually seen it from Gallup as well. Today, as of 2019 into today, more people consider themselves Republican, less people consider themselves Democrats. Walk away is legit. It's happening. More and more people are walking away, and elected officials are finally stepping through that fire and saying enough. They won't run for they don't want to be involved in a party that's dominated by socialism. So you let me know what you think, but I guess we can only wait and see. I think this is fascinating what's happening in this small town, and it's not just there, it's everywhere. So I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. youtube.com/TimCastNews. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all next time.